Andrea, please. Talking. Oh dear, sorry, there's the way to start the day. No, welcome everybody. It's great to have folk here bright and early, and I'm deeply appreciative both of my fellow committee members, but also staff for being here in ELT. Miriam, welcome to the meeting. It seems strange probably as an outsider to be welcoming you, but Miriam and I go back a hang of a long way, which is, I don't know whether that's good or bad, but it's tremendous in the interim period to have your support, and I've even appreciated the advice and guidance you've given me today, so it's great to have you here as well, Miriam, thank you. Can we start the meeting, please, with the karakia? Join me, please. Whakataka te ho ki te uru. Whakataka te ho ki te tonga. Kia tina ki uta. Ki tai. E he ake ana ora. E teo he huka. Ahu te he moria. Thank you very much. Now, apologies, Tori, you're out for a period a wee bit later on, and John is a full apology for the meeting. I think there was some other clashing council commitment. Yeah, so he is a full apology. I do hope to conclude the meeting more or less by around about midday. It's very imprecise, but precise, if we can keep that going. So folk are able to be here for that time? Yep. Great, in which case I'm going to move from the chair that we sustain these apologies. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Liz. Could you please take your remotes and vote?
Great start.
It's taken about 3 years, that's right. That's right. Great, the motion's carried. Are there any matters coming up that your interests may need to be known about? Yeah, that would be the case. Minutes of our last meeting, which were on the 20th of November. I'm going to move from the chair that we take those as true and correct. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions, clarifications, corrections to be made? No? In that case, can I ask you please take your remotes again and vote? Thank you, it's carried. Again, I don't think I have been informed of any matters that items on the agenda. There are none, and we haven't had any requests for public participation, which then gets us into the body of our papers. So, insurance update. Well done, Sarah, Andy, possibly others, I'm not certain, but it'd be great to get your lead on this one, please.
Kia ora koutou. It's nice to be back into the swing of things. So look, a pretty short form paper update this time around. We have provided a very small snippet of a market update, but there's a link there for anyone that wants to get really involved in what's going on in the insurance market there. Geordie, I'm looking at you. I'm sure you've read it. It's a good read. We can talk about it later. So some extra light reading. Look, I just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out for my team at the moment. I don't know if this is the correct forum to do it, but I've had a team working really, really hard on this over the summer holidays. We got an intern in, and it was really, really cool to have the work towards our insurance renewal in such good, safe hands. And like I honestly can say we're going to London in a couple of weeks. Andrew and I'll be jetting off with a really, really fulsome set of information, and I'm quite excited about the presentation. We've got videos. It's very exciting. Anyway, so the key item, I think, within this paper, though, bring it back to my feet on the ground, is probably the work plan that we've got, we've sort of developed up and drafted up for the next sort of 12 to 18 months. We discussed this with you briefly last week, Bruce, about how we're going to manage this. So I know you asked for not a two-headed snake, but what we've effectively given you is a two-headed snake this year, this time around. And it just highlights the development between where we've kind of progressed, which was largely linear in terms of risk appetite statements, doing the modelling and things like that. And we're now sort of going into a world where we're taking two paths. We're going to continue with some more modelling later half of this year, but we're also entering into this captive feasibility, which talks to the alternative risk transfer work stream that we've kind of got in there, and hoping to continue to work with the Audit and Risk Committee on shaping that up with our partners at Aon and really coming back with a good, hopefully a really robust solution to probably take up to council, because it's a pretty big decision in that space. So key areas of focus is getting to London, getting renewals done, and then this will sort of tail in after that. I did receive a few questions from Tony that they missed out of the Q&A. So do you want me to just cover those off now, or I can take them offline? So is it, through you, Chair, is it best if I read these out and just sort of explain?
So let's hear the answers.
Yeah, so the question one, what is the expected impact of the transfer of water assets to a new water entity on our insurance program? So largely our insurance arrangements will follow the assets across to the new entity. We run a 1 June to 31 May insurance renewal program, which doesn't quite align with maybe a financial year and things like that. But we've been signalling this with our insurance partners into the market for a good couple of years now because of all the reform developments. So, and we also have our below ground or our infrastructure assets on a separate policy. We run 4 main material damage policies, and that's one of them. It will be, the majority of it will be a lift and shift over to the new entity, and they will pick it up whenever they get established. So they'll pay for that part of the year, and they will have fully insured assets when they go across. It's a bit tricky. The only assets that kind of sit outside of that are the wastewater treatment plants. So they're on the above ground policy. So there'll be a little bit of unpicking there, but largely they will go across as a whole policy. Some of the questions you have asked here are a wee bit tricky to answer because you're trying to get us to unpick stormwater and the other 2 waters, and we don't actually insure the policy in a, while we have a listing of all the assets, they're intermingled, so we don't look at them separately. But you did ask what the asset values are and how much insurance we have on those. So the 8.9 billion is the full replacement value of the whole portfolio of below ground assets. 260 odd million is wastewater treatment plants. And against those assets, we apply the 60-40 rule with central government, the assumption that they will come in and cover that cost. So we hold a $150 million purchased insurance product portfolio. It's not with one insurer, it's with many. And there's a total of $375 million of coverage on that portfolio. Did that answer your questions, Ajay? I apologise, I can't unpick, especially with such short, I can't unpick the stormwater assets, but appreciating that that's kind of a gnarly issue. That will play out in the water space and how they separate those assets from each other.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I just wanted to, first of all, get the main thing I wanted is to get assurance that as the part of the new water entity and these big transfers of literally billions of dollars of assets, that the insurance element's going to be covered off.
I can speak to that. Absolutely, it is. And we're certainly covering that off in the financial strategy for the long-term plan and making sure we're thinking about the implications for that. When you do remove water assets from our balance sheet, we still have a significant gap in terms of our insurance coverage, and we're looking at how we mitigate that. That will be top of mind as we go through this process.
Of course, and it's actually, I'm very reassured because we've got a dedicated team keeping an eye on that. So that was the main reason that I could get an understanding of your thoughts about the whole thing. I guess the other question, which you can. So I pulled out the stormwater assets because I understand that the stormwater assets are actually staying with us from an ownership perspective, and so I just wanted to get. I think that needs to be unpacked. You're right, but it's time. We've got a wee while to work through what that is. The other question was, I guess, in terms of just a good setup, whether or not you've got any comments about being able to help or advise the new water entity about how you do this, because you've done so much good work. You're getting some very effective and increasing coverage on insurance of these assets. Is there help that we can make sure that that's passed on to the new entity?
Yes, so I think that's definitely like in other hats that I wear. I'm talking to the regional team on treasury matters and things like that. They are conscious that insurance is also a big item that they will need to consider, and we're having ongoing conversations. Is probably, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say Aon also are the broker for the rest of the region, so they're quite well placed to also be advising the council separately, but then the water regional team, or whatever that looks like, as a whole when that is established. So
okay, thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Yes, Ray.
Thanks. Just to clarify a couple of figures that you actually just gave. You said we have, what was the 160 million insurance that you said? Was that
$150 million? That's the amount of insurance that we purchased dedicated to water assets.
Yep, okay.
Below ground assets.
And what was the 375 million?
This 375 is the total envelope of insurance when you bring into the 60-40, so the assumption that the central government will cover 60% of the below ground asset.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Tony?
The other thing I just wanted to pick up on was your comment on paragraph 27 that you were maybe looking at in terms of going and redoing the insurance, that you might be able to secure some additional capacity, which is excellent. That because insurance is the best way of insuring our future risk. So I was wondering if you could comment on maybe sort of roughly maybe how much you could perhaps get, another 20%, or is that the sort of thing you're doing, and are you optimistic about that?
So we're optimistic that we will be offered additional capacity this year. So we had what they refer to as a soft insurance market last year. So there was plenty of capacity, and that played out in the rates that we paid were on a flat. There was not an increase on rate. Last year, this played out in the housing portfolio, so we were able to pick up an extra $25 million on the top of the housing portfolio. So we see that particular portfolio as fully insured and nice and tidy. So this year we will, when Andrew and I go to London, we will definitely be saying we're open for offers of new capacity. We want to make sure that it's affordable capacity, because you can probably buy anything you like at a price, but we've got a budget. We have we have an idea of where we would like that deployed as well. So the majority of, or the largest gap driver, if you're talking insurance gap, is very much in the above ground infrastructure. So those assets are, we have the least amount of coverage on a line. So we would be targeting that policy in particular to pick up some more capacity, but we have to go and work through the relationships and all those sorts of good things with our broker, look at our budget, see what sort of money we have to spend, and we will definitely come back to you. So we've committed to come back to you if that's a material uplift, and we'll definitely share that with you before we commit to anything extra.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Iona.
Thank you for your good work. Quick question, I presume that they don't come to us. They did once. I did a presentation to them with the officers.
So interesting you should ask that. We're literally presenting to two of what are they? They're our broker partners in London. They're actually coming here tomorrow. We're going for a quick walk around Tanaka, and we'll have a bit of a debrief with them about the dynamics they're seeing in London and the market, and they will feed that back to us. So we've got time to prepare that into our presentation that we will give to the underwriters. So they are our equivalent of Aon here over in London that we work with. But we do also, every second year or so, we have a group of underwriters who will come out. They came out last year.
Okay.
I was away at a rowing event, so I couldn't be here, but my very capable team showed them around the city, and they loved coming and having a look at the actual assets that they're interacting with. So.
Okay, that's very encouraging. Now, I did have a happy day because finally someone in the insurance industry is talking about ecological collapse, which is in a later paper, which is very important.
You read the paper?
Well, it's terrible news, but at least once you've identified the problem, at least you can start solving it. So I guess that gave me great hope because I think there's been too much, there's a lot of focus on climate change for very good reason, but there is not focus on the ecological systems and all the crises that we're having there too. So are you starting to think about that?
So last year and the year before, I think, when Andrea and I went over to London, we very much made it clear that we've declared a climate and ecological emergency. Sorry, words are failing me at the moment. And so yes, that sort of runs through our narrative. So it's very much forefront of mind for us.
Okay, good. Well, I expect to see that coming through.
Yep.
So I guess in the risk profile, and when we're talking about insurance, we need to be thinking about that too. And did anyone have any view on the airport sale? Or not?
Look, it'll be interesting to test. Nothing at this stage, but
Will you talk about that when you go to London?
Indicate it last year because we were just consulting on our long-term plan, and that was very much as part of a plan. But the narrative last year was we can't give you solid information because we haven't adopted our long-term plan. So we were going in March is a little bit of an annoying time because you haven't got a long-term plan to sort of sit on and talk with true confidence. But we delivered messages around our district plan and the other work streams and the stuff we had in train last year. So similar sort of approach will be taken.
Oh, cool. And last question. I also had a happy day because even Aon is talking about the climate catastrophe. So finally. But it seems that insurers aren't actually that worried, which was interesting. So I did take a quick look at the executive summary. They're kind of like, oh, look, if you build better, it'll be fine. And I would have expected to see a more conservative approach.
Yeah, insurers are interesting because if they can model it, they can understand it and they can price it. The best example I can think of is 2 years ago when Cyclone Gabrielle and the Auckland anniversary floods happened. We had to go to London not long after that and make it very clear that Wellington is quite geographically diversified away from that, and that we weren't a suburb of Auckland, so we weren't impacted. But that kind of caught them on the hop because none of their modelling suggested that event could have happened. So none of it was priced in. So then the insurance, they will now price it in kind of Uber price it in, and so we'll be playing catch up for events like that. It's the known risks that they're quite comfortable with. It's the stuff that they can't see coming that kind of worry them, and that you'd probably see show up in those reports if it caught them on the hop.
But they know that there has been concerns around ecological systems for decades. And they knew about climate change. So, okay, they're still learning. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Iona. Geordie.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I guess within the context of the events that are happening globally in the reinsurance market, I was wondering if we had any forecasts in terms of where reinsurers were looking to invest capital at the moment and where that might leave ventilation in some of our placements?
Cool question, thank you. Look, I think there's plenty of capital in the market, right? So retreat from the market will probably pull away from things that have happened recently. I'm spitballing here, so please don't write this down. The wildfires in the US is an interesting one, not captured in that report, obviously, because it's so recent, but, they have lots of not self-insurance, but government insurance bits that will step in, and the US market is largely insulated to the US. So I don't know, I mean, I'll ask Andy this as well, but I don't think we will see much ventilation given the market is soft and there's plenty of capacity. That didn't consume a whole lot of capacity that we would be competing with. If a significant event had happened in New Zealand, it probably would be a different story because we're geographically diversified is the word, then it's not, I don't assume that there's going to be a big impact on us, particularly this year.
Yeah, cool.
Do you have
Thanks.
anything to add?
Yeah.
Sorry, Andy.
That's all right. So one of the things that we're hearing out of the reinsurance markets is that the US markets are looking to diversify away from the US. And one of the things that is becoming a little bit more palatable is New Zealand earthquake risk. So that's something that we've struggled with historically. So we are seeing positive signs from the market that the knowns of earthquake risk are now being considered as a more positive thing when compared with unknowns such as climate change effects. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had another, I guess, question around the earthquake risk aspect and some of the above ground assets as well, and the way that I guess we're marketing, in particular, the housing assets that we have to the reinsurers, and perhaps the co-benefits that come with sort of EQC's placements in the first part of that coverage, and how well that's kind of received by those insurers as being a positive or providing better rates in terms of known risks.
Yeah, they've definitely considered it for us. What we saw when that changed from 150k per dwelling to 300 was that in that year we split our policy into a short policy and then to recognise that changeover date, and at that point in time we saw a $1 million saving. So we can say categorically that that is being considered, and it's good results for us.
Yeah,
Awesome.
because the risk that they attach at is that much higher, especially on a large portfolio like what we've got. The modelling we did last year as well showed some interesting results because, again, diversified across the city, certain assets would perform differently to others depending on what the sort of subsurface was like. So all of this increased understanding is also helping to tell the story to the insurers that we really understand our risk and we're constantly evolving in this space.
Yeah, if I could have one more, because I guess that kind of interesting stuff around the understanding the quality of our assets, I guess that our future state that we're sort of moving towards is a scenario where we might foresee that the most likely damage to a building is up to what EQC would pay out, and therefore we might start looking at specific placements on buildings in terms of whether we would opt into extra coverage or not. Yeah, cool, awesome. Fantastic work, I love it.
And I presume that might also affect your modelling around your captive as well, because you might be wanting to assume some risk. Iona, I think you've got a question.
I love this stuff too, but it stresses me out and probably will keep me awake at night. Geordie's question prompted me to remember about my question, which is, why are they not kind of saving up for a rainy day? Like, if they've got capacity now when they know that there are future disasters coming, would it not be better to space it? And I just don't know how they kind of operate, but cheaper prices now are going to hurt them later on.
We're getting into Treasury land now. And I think it's about how they deploy their capital. So they're going to get a higher return into more riskier, because ultimately if you've got a higher risk profile, you pay more for it. Same with bank funding and things like that. If you're a BBB minus, you pay a lot more for your interest than maybe we would at AA. Look, there's lots of, it's an attractive investment. Over recent years, we've seen interest rates kind of spike up and things like that. So people, big organisations like superannuation funds and things like that, have a requirement to have a diversified investment. Putting it into cash a couple of years ago would have given them a really safe investment, but it wasn't that the higher returns because of the interest rates wouldn't last. So effectively people are looking for higher returns. They're willing to take more risk on the capital that they're investing, and therefore that's putting more capital into the insurance space because it does provide investors with more of a return. It's a risk-weighted return, knowing that chances are there's going to be a catastrophe somewhere around the globe, but the current economic environment is meaning that insurance companies are attracting more capital, more investment, therefore they have more insurance products to deploy. And you can see that playing out. So we've briefly talked to you about the likes of catastrophe bonds as well, which is not quite a pure investment play, but it's similar in that that's more capital, so more cash in the system basically that's looking for a place to land and receive a return. And we're seeing quite a lot, like billions and billions of dollars investing into that. It gives them exposure to the insurance industry, but they're not all in. So I think it's just the nature of the system is quite flush with cash. There will be events that will consume that capital and it will all drop out. So insurance is quite like economic cycles. It will go in sort of boom and bust. And that's what we saw in the 7 years leading up to last year. We had COVID impacts and things like that. So it was harder. Prices were going up because you had to pay more money to attract the capital into the back end of the market. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but that was...
It does. It's incredibly interesting. Can I just ask one more question?
Awesome.
I like to ask high-level questions, as you know. So the other problem we've got is our economic system's going to come under pressure because it relies on using natural capital and not having too many catastrophes. Mm-hmm. So are they thinking when the economic system comes under pressure from the climate and from nature that then that money won't be there? And then what do we...
I think you then take that back to a risk appetite that the insurers are willing to take, right? So we're seeing retreat not necessarily from the city, but from certain risks. So I think of fire risk, for example. So we've got sort of mechanisms in our system that mean that we pay fire levies and things like that. So they don't have to insure us for fire risks. If we can demonstrate that we're not exposed to certain risks, then they will either negotiate that out of the policy altogether, or they'll price that accordingly. Yeah.
So we have reached the 1.5. Rebecca seems to laughing at me. Yeah. We've reached the one. Oh, it was something else. So it's just because we have breached the 1.5 degrees. Like, we're not going in the right direction. US has pulled out of Paris. I mean, like, we're not going always in the right direction of travel. Anyway. But I guess I'm raising this is so that we continue to do deep thinking about these major threats. Now, I'm not a doomsayer. I just kind of think you have to identify the problem and then you can solve it, right?
Yeah. No,
you are a doomsayer, are you?
Andy loves a good catastrophe story. I'm constantly getting tsunami, Look, we're very conscious that there's a number of risks that we should, and we're also developing conversations about what risks we don't have, right? So there's studies going on at the moment about how a wildfire like what happened in LA really couldn't happen in Wellington. So we're keeping abreast of all the things that are happening out there and kind of then playing them out in New Zealand or in Wellington environment and saying, yes, that's a risk, no, that's a risk, not a risk. So Andrew and I will touch on that when we talk to the insurers in London and say, look, and there's been studies done. If you get Sean or Dane in here, you can probably answer a lot better than me, but studies on how these risks may or may not play out for the city. So.
Thank you for those questions. Yes, Ray, final question, because I have one or two to get in as well. You guys have had a fair crack.
Yep. When you go to London and talk to the insurers, do we give our view of some of these issues, or do they give their views and say that this is the global view? So, such as we make a big deal of climate change and rising seawaters and things here, but what's the view of the insurers in London? Like, do they look at the global situation? Like, we've only got one sea level, so they must be looking at all the different countries and saying, this is how we actually assess the world, whereas we're looking at our own situation here in New Zealand. So what do you actually discuss?
Look, that's the exact reason we go to London. We are a very small city on the bottom side of the world. I mean, like I said a couple of years ago, we had to actually put Wellington on a map and say we're not a suburb of Auckland. So it's all about, and this is where the benefits are, right? It's all about Andrea and I going and telling that really good story. This is Wellington, this is what we do, this is who we are. Mia Whānau's done an amazing video for us to put into the presentation this year. It's about us telling Wellington's story because they have hundreds of submissions like ours every day coming through their inbox, and it's about us telling the story of our risk and how we understand our risk and how we're managing our risk. So, yeah, that's the key point for going to London and doing this. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I think when we do visit, there's no problem in us sharing our presentation with you. We haven't got it complete yet, so when we do that, we can share the presentation with you. You'll probably be surprised it is high level, but it is actually educating them about who we are and the risks that we're working towards. So we're more than happy to share it.
I think the ultimate sanction on a town was that Invercargill was being dropped off Google. So there we go. Be wary, Wellington. Okay. Look, thank you for that, guys. That is tremendous. I've been very happy to let the conversation run because I'm conscious that this has been and is germane to, a lot of what's going on. This really reflects that resilience and insurance being one factor, such a strategic risk and such a dynamic risk for us here in Wellington. So I've been very keen to get it going, but I just wanted to bring us back to the work plan, if I can, please, because I know that you're plenty of things. So look, great, I get it. Key focus is around renewal and all the work that you're doing. That's super cool. And I appreciate the point that we're going out with probably some more favourable stories and the chance for better capacity. So look, just quickly want to look at the roadmap. And I was just interested firstly in paragraph 32 about the pursuing the climate impact modelling. How does that fit into the roadmap? Just give us a quick sense of that, please, Andy.
Yeah, so the climate impact modelling is something that we're working on with the climate change team. And what we hope to get out of that is something that can be used for multiple purposes. So for the climate change team to continue on with their work and also for us to start quantifying the risks that we may face from climate change in our space as well.
Yeah, okay. Good, and I think that also presumably feeds into really what was phase 2 of your work, which is this concept of a stronger site-by-site assessment of risk, correct? Yeah, okay. And look, and obviously phase 1 is around the captive, and I think you've really indicated that it's two-step. One is actually there's going to be a very, quick is the wrong word because otherwise we'd be there, but actually there is a sense of does this get through the next gateway or not?
Look, I think phase 1, how I understand it, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but is a holding up a mirror to our organisation and saying, is a captive the correct answer for us and our unique risk profile and what we're facing in terms of challenges in the insurance gap that we talk about through the long-term plan amendment and elsewhere. Phase 2 will be more focused on the market. So get through the first gateway and say, yep, we think a captive is a good idea, and then it's about the tactical deployment of that, so size, domicile, all those sorts of things. So that's kind of how I understand it.
Okay, no, it's good, but it's still, yes, in my sense of gateway go, no go, I think we're agreeing on that, so that's really superb. And just so from the sort of the output perspective, how far away is that?
Look, we've engaged Aon to start this. We have supplied them with all of the requests for information that they've sent through. We're just working through how that phases and how that plays out. But over the next sort of 6 months, we'll be able to. So we've been really focused in on renewals and things like that, and so that
I get that. No, I totally understand that. Look, I just marking out, Rebecca, not marking out. Actually, this becomes a really interesting play because I mean, between actually what is our financial strategy, which is LTP and yada, versus also what is strategic risk and something which we've done. So I hope as you particularly go down that captive business case line that we think about both committees, because we need to look at it from a risk perspective as in contrast to the the financial strategy perspective, which clearly is your team's work. So I'll be intrigued to see how that one can be worked through as we go forward. Perhaps even joint briefings, you never know. Okay, that's really good. Have I got any final chance? I think everybody's had a pretty good crack at questions. As I said, I'll let it run because actually it's really important. It's pretty pivotal to our planning at the moment. So we wish you well as you go north. And you get that extra insurance and come back with lots of good lollies for us, which will be superb. Can we move, please, to the resolutions, which is that we receive the information, we note the update for prep for the policy renewal, and we endorse the work program. And Andrea, just note, you said making the video, perhaps even the booklets available. I think that's actually a really good idea. It was almost my first thought when I read the paper. Thought, actually, quite good to see those. So perhaps, as is appropriate, you might think, you include us in it. That would be great. Right. Do I have a mover and a seconder for these motions, please? Thank you, Liz. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Tony. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, can you please take your remotes and vote, please? Thank you for that. The vote's carried. So we have move on to our assurance update, John, and we actually have the first of, I think, at least 2 new faces today. Murray, are you coming forward as well? I'd welcome you to come forward as well. John, I'll leave you to introduce Murray rather than me do a ham-fisted approach. So no worries, in your hands.
Good morning. So taking the paper as read, it's a fairly light touch. The core kind of things I'd like to flag are that, as mentioned in the paper, the outsource is substantially complete. So by that, we have completed the procurement of Grant Thornton and completed the offboarding of relevant staff. The final step remaining is the kind of revision of existing processes. So Murray is our Murray is our partner for Grant Thornton. He and his team bring with them a wealth of experience across kind of the various risk areas that council face. And again, rather than make a ham-fisted effort to introduce himself, I'm going to let him do that.
Welcome, Murray.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Murray Chandler. I'm a partner with Grant Thornton. I've been doing risk and internal audit for close to 30 years, in fact, probably over 30 years, which says something about my age. So we're very excited with the opportunity. It's a really interesting program we've got set forward. We've started the work on 2 pieces of work. One is earthquake-prone buildings, and the other one is around contract management. So quite different, but quite important processes. We are also working with John to start the planning for next year, which is a matter of this stage of understanding where the risks sit, understanding what the coverage requirements are, and just getting effectively a long list. We'll take that through the management team, get their perspectives on that, and that will then come back to the committee in terms of understanding what to be done and what the priority is across that.
When do you think that will be done by, Murray?
We are hoping to get it substantially done in the next couple of weeks, and then go to management after that. And then I think it's slotted for the next audit committee meeting, which is May.
Brilliant. Good. Thank you. You reminded me when my next meeting is, but yes, it will be May. That's right. Yeah, it would be great to get that done in that time so that we have a fresh approach starting 1 July for the new financial year, which would be tremendous. That's great. Thank you. Well, welcome along, Murray. Obviously, we'll see a lot more of you as the cycle goes on. So welcome to Wellington City if you haven't been welcome before. John, anything you want to say from your report that would be helpful for the committee, please?
Just that there's a slight error in paragraph 9. So we had one protected disclosure raised in the period. However, this was subsequently withdrawn by the discloser. So it was raised. We've kept the note on file of the kind of the circumstances, but that wasn't kind of put through the full process.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions for John and Murray? Yes, Iona.
Yeah, thanks. I did pick that one up because then at paragraph 14, it just maybe it would be worthwhile just tidying that up a little bit. Yeah. Just a really quick question, which was around the delays. So around the mutual multi-year funding and complaints. You say you've offered support. I'm just wondering why those delays happened.
So can I just check, Ona, you're looking now at the schedule on page 20 of our agenda, correct? Assurance? Yeah. Page 20's got the
attachment
oh,
one.
paragraph 17, sorry. One of the same thing.
The comment in the report or the attachment, because they kind of correlate. Oh, well, I was just... Okay. So the customer complaints actions, they've progressed to a state where they've got a trial option for how they are going to do reporting and kind of increase the kind of level of rigour in the reporting of customer complaints. However, that is kind of dependent on the availability of developer time within Smart Council. Correct.
Yeah, sorry, Anna, it comes up again when you look at the schedules on page 20 and 21.
But I just,
And I was noting that things had gone out. I still note that primarily they're still within Q4 of this financial year, which I guess we can handle, but not unnaturally. You look at an older date in November 23, was it? November 23 report, think, oh, gee whiz, can we get on with it? So look, that's great. And the fact that the solution potentially is there and being trialled, that'd be good. Any other questions that folk would like to raise? Thank you for that. As you said, light touch, but I mean, just important that we know where things are at, and obviously in May we get a real chance to have a crack at how our program going forward meets our strategic risks. So I look forward to that opportunity, which would be great. Can we move to the resolutions, please, which is that we receive John's report and Murray as well. I'll move that. Thank you, Iona. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Tony?
Yes, I just wanted to note that I think we're doing some good work in the assurance and the topics like earthquakes and contracts. There are issues. I'm heartened that has the target. But I think a lot of the people would say that it is. I just was wanting to ask officers before we do a bit of a report whether, and it's just for their consideration, whether we could have perhaps a workshop around the way the new assurance program is going to work, and maybe have a bit more of a discussion forum about the topics that are going to be added on for next year. So just for the consideration. I'm not demanding it, but I just think we should be, part of the journey is just having an open discussion around it. So apart from, because I very much support this is a very important process to help us lift, deal with our risks and lift the game.
I'm really open to that idea, Tony. I've had the benefit a couple of weeks ago of meeting Murray for the first time in his role here. And I mean, we have precious little resource in lots of ways and a lot of topics. So, I mean, subject to ELT, I think that would be a really good idea. So let's take that one offline, Miriam and team, and we'll see with John and Murray what might be possible as far as that's concerned. I like that idea. Any other comments? There being none, can I ask you to take your remote, please, and vote that whether or not we receive the information, please. Thank you. It's carried because Tori's out, as she indicated. Rachel, if you could come forward, please, and we'll deal with risk management policy, please. So again, another area that's undergoing a fair bit of change, and I guess in the sense of progress update, but still with some artifacts here. So Rachel, in your hands, please.
So we'll take the paper as read and just open up to some of the elements on the paper. I've submitted the policy that we're in the process of adopting, just for any commentary. If
Rachel, could I just ask you though, before I open up to the committee, could you just give us a sense of actually, I'll be honest, what you're doing, because for the committee, there was the slightly sort of angst-ridden last session, which you were, I think, in the tail end of when coming into the organisation, and in fact, you are in a reform process. Can you give a sense of what the roadmap is and where you're at? Bearing in mind, I agree, we need to have a look at the risk management policy, please.
Absolutely, yes, quite right. So the change process that I'm initiated for the risk management in the organisation is, as we saw before, I'm trying to make things simpler for more of the kaimahi to be able to engage, and that was the purpose of the simplified risk profile, which is just a representation of the key points that inform the strategic risk. Then it was setting the framework, which is to encourage ownership and continuous improvement, and setting policy, which now the policy, which is a key component of that framework, is informing. And then another key element is a system-based solution for us to record and monitor the strategic risks, and with a greater focus on the controls that are hanging off there and linking those controls to the strategic risks, and also identifying where there's crossover. For example, insurance is coming up frequently on the strategic risks profiles, and so that is going to be elevated as quite a key control for the organisation. So the purpose of that is to then get us into a better state for our next risk maturity assessment. Once we've got those system-based solutions and policy in place, this will give us a higher risk rating, in my opinion, give us a higher rating for the organisation, because we were at the last risk assessment of our maturity, it was quite a bit below where we should be, where we're aiming to be, but it is a journey, and yeah, that's where we're on.
So perhaps just to, again, before I open up, just ask perhaps my final question. Can committee turn to page, I think it's 39, my eyesight must be going out. Yes, which is the WCC strategic risk ownership. Now, ownership's one thing, but can you just give us an indication the difference between the two boxes?
Is this in the policy?
No, this is the that page there.
Oh, yes.
Because I think this is the one feature that's starting to move from where we've been to where we are going, if I've got it correct.
Yes. So, a key for that is looking at what risk profiles we had, what coverage we had, identifying if there was a gaps, looking at comparable local government organisations or comparable organisations that what are their strategic risks, what is our local environment, what are our emerging threats, what are the emerging threats globally, and also because we also had a change of the senior leadership team, we looked at what are the core principles in terms of allocating those across ownership-wise, and looking at where there were gaps in terms of, for example, our economic environment. This is a rising threat, really, a higher level of concern. So we're workshopping that next week to develop that. So this is a snapshot of the progress and the direction, but perhaps by May there might be some tweaks to this once we've done all the workshops that are starting next week.
Look, I am interested both in ownership and say well done. I presume this has gone through ELT, so I'm very interested in who the owners are, but I'm actually perhaps more interested in what are in each of the boxes, which is the, as you've indicated, the research and search you've been doing as to what actually constitute our strategic risks. Because I think, again, Tony, if I could reflect on your comment about internal assurance, this is something which ultimately I think we want to have a closer look at as we go forward, because this is going to form the framework of a lot of our, hopefully, the work of our committee as we go forward. So I appreciate that. So, folks, I thank you for that. It's helpful just to get a rough sense of where things are at. So I appreciate that, Rachel. Could I ask for questions if you've got any at this stage? We do need to deal particularly with the policy, but we'll make certain we close that one out. Iona, you've got a question or two.
I'm so happy. You are now one of my favourite officers because you have brought all these global risks, because I think we haven't always seen those. So if we look at this is on page 43, colleagues, 5 of those are environmental. critical changes to earth systems, natural resource shortages. Thank goodness, because, this has been going on since the 70s. My question is how we tie these very high-level things with the outline, because my experience of this organisation is that it can't deal with those big challenges, and doing a bow tie risk assessment on natural resource shortages or food, for example, which is we know is a long-term issue. We don't pick it up. So I know this is probably at the beginning of things, it will take time to develop, but if you could just talk me through that.
Yes, so that's the purposes of the workshops, to test these out, see where we have gaps. The bow tie, that is the simple diagram, is just merely a representation of the full assessment that goes behind that, and that's where we would list out all of the drivers, all of the impacts, rate those, see where we're outside of appetite. I mean, that's another conversation for later about resetting the appetites, because they're not going to match the new profiles. And therefore, that's where we can hopefully elevate some of these items that are currently missing off the profiles, and getting those into the system, looking at strategies and identifying areas where we could have a gap in terms of a strategy that we should be working on.
Sorry, will elected members be in those workshops?
Yes, and some of them. Some of them.
So you organise a specific one for us, yeah?
Yeah, for the new profiles. For the focus of the others, it's been subject matter experts, and then taking those to ELT members as and when they're ready. Some of them are about 70% to 100% confident that they've got it right, so we're still some ongoing conversations.
Sorry, just one more question. The subject matter experts, oh my God. Economists, I have a massive problem with them as a profession. Will we have people who do understand some of that there are limits, biophysical limits? Hopefully that will, that will be in their vocabulary.
Yes, so they're internal subject matter experts, so the people that I've been identified as are the right people to work with me on the profiles.
If I could take that offline with you,
yes.
That'd be great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Iona. Tony.
Thank you. Thank you for pulling this report together. I have to say I find it a little more confusing, an overall report. Commenting on the policy, one of the challenges I found with commenting on the policy is not actually seeing the listing of our strategic risks. Now, I know the policy and the actual risks are like inputs and output, if you like. But I was wondering in future if the risk report would always have just an appendix, a list of all the strategic risks, because I do think if that's possible, and also our risk tolerance, because I think both of those things are, our actual current statements should be put to the elected members and the public on a regular basis, just to remind us all about what the outcome of the risk framework is, and that can hopefully feed back into the policy. Is that's possible?
Yes, that's the work that's underway.
Okay. Second question, I guess, and it's a bit of clarification as to whether these strategic risks are risks that are decided by ELT and reported to us, or whether they're the risks of the council. I think that's a little bit confusing still, so maybe that can be part of the future clarifications, because as a councillor, and we do have lots of discussions around risky things that the council does, it's a bit unclear as to if someone says this risk is this statement, who is saying that. I think it's very important, and as much as possible we should be aligned, but doesn't that happen naturally? So is that fair bit of feedback? I guess it's feedback, not quite a question. The third question is, we've just had some other information around an external review that commented on the public safety side of the council's risk, and I was, I guess, wanting to ask you that is public safety, our assessment of risk for the public, is that's in the strategic risk framework, and that's going, maybe that could be Can that be brought forward in terms of maybe the next meeting, just to say that where we're going to go with some of the feedback that we're receiving on our risk framework?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
A comment, Tony, on your second point. Look, I always look for, within Council, ELT to help provide a lead to the Audit and Risk Committee around what are perceived to be the strategic risks. I think equally there's got to be a chance for the voice of elected members, and dare I say it, independents, to express their views and affirmation or bringing a different angle. It's a mutual approach, because actually there does need to be strong alignment, and particularly when we start to deal with, because we're going to have to, because I don't know quite where we're at, but we need to start getting our risk appetite right. Actually, and I find from my experience elsewhere, that's where the biggest non-alignment comes. Management's here, councillors are here, or indeed vice versa. That if we take the first objective of this policy, which is, I don't quite like the word optimise, but I'll use it, optimised decision making. If we haven't got that aligned, well, I was going to think of a technical phrase which I can't use in this room, but actually it's not going to work. So, this really is a case of, I think it's a mutual need to work between both ELT and the committee, elected members. Okay, any other questions or points folk would like to raise? Okay, look, I find it interesting, and thank you again. I know I love it's the world. Let's see, it's the World Economic Forum. I don't know whether Mr. Trump would see that as a particularly worthwhile organisation these days, but it's a really interesting read to think what's coming through there. I don't know whether we would, if I can just perhaps even answer yours, at least give you my view. I don't know whether we would adopt these whole as bowlers, but I think they are strong influencers on the nature of our work. So, an armed uprising, I don't think we're going to have that as a big risk. But how would it affect us? Supply chain, inflation, those sorts of things that start to talk about our economic well-being. So they really need to be considered as part of at least the context, if not being the actual specific. Sorry, you want to respond to that, Ona? I was trying to provide a wee bit of a view. We are clearly aren't in debate, but I've got a reasonably open meeting, so you're welcome to make a comment. So,
briefly, look, one of the things that we know is that often institutions are really resistant to change, and it takes a lot of work from on the edges to bring ideas into the centre. And, people like the Club of Rome, limits to growth, like they were saying this decades and decades ago. So to actually now that some of these threats have come into the mainstream is really, really significant. And it's, it's a tribute to people who are in institutions and can read it and go, okay, actually, this is a problem. It's not just some radical on the fringes. So, like I say, once you've identified the problem, you can then, of course, get on with fixing it. So, of course, these are very, very big global challenges, but they will impact our little city at the bottom of the world because we're also connected now. So I actually feel very hopeful.
Good.
Yeah, it's actually incredibly positive just to see what the problems are, laid out clearly, and then we can get on with the solution. So I can't wait for the workshop. It's going to be really exciting.
Thank you, Anna. In terms of doing the business, we've got to resolve, I think it's to endorse in principle the risk profile. The risk management, endorse the risk management policy. Do you folk have any particular points around the risk management? Has this been through ELT? Oh, I'm asking for clarification, sorry, or points on it, if people wanted to raise questions about it.
Yes, it went on the 20th of December.
Right, okay, so it's been through them. Rightio, I sense people want to debate things more, so do I therefore have we've got 3 motions in front of us: to receive, to provide endorsement in principle of the strategic risk profile, subjects, which was page whatever it was, and endorse the risk management policy. Thank you, Anna. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Liz. Okay, we are open to debate. Do you want to go first? Tony, I think you had a point you wanted to make. Yep, go for it, Tony.
Okay. Risk management is a thing that one of the things that the council has always to keep an eye on is risk management. So, in some respects, this is the most important service that this committee oversees. So it has to be done properly, and I do appreciate that the council has a focus on that, and it's developing policy to support that, and I do support all of that. I think we also have to keep an eye on what are our strategic risks, and in the end, I believe our risks are really the counterparty to our service delivery. In other words, we've got a very wide range of responsibilities, legislative, regulatory, service delivery, and management. And it's the risks to delivering those are the key things that the risk framework should cover. We have 13 strategic risks, and I think it's important to know that things that should be on that list are potential things that can happen to stop us on delivering on our responsibilities and on our delivery. So it has to have focus. And, much like when we prioritise projects, the hard decision to be made is not what's on the list, but what's not on the list. Because we can say there's risk everywhere. But the reality is we need to make sure that we are focusing on those risks that will get in the road of our core responsibilities and deliveries. And the assurance program supports the risk framework, and their two topics are earthquake-prone buildings and contract management. And those are things that are directly related. Because we fail on dealing with earthquake-prone buildings, that's a really bad thing for the city. And if we fail to deliver on better contract management, again, that means we're wasting money, or we're not getting projects done on time and on budget. So I just want to bring members of the committee to focus on what strategic risk is really about. We're on the journey towards that, and hopefully we're going to have a chance to re-look at all this, and as you point out, Bruce, make sure that the elected members are aligned to the ALT so that we're all united on what is the most important thing to keep an eye on. And an example of that around risk keeps coming up. We're now talking about fencing around the waterfront, and that's really a risk mitigation solution to the risk, health and safety risk. I think it was the exercise and the crossover with our risk tolerance work that we've already done is very important to note. And it's a bit disappointing in a way that none of the commentary has reflected on the risk appetite decisions that this council has already made. And in terms of community health and safety, we've got a statement, a risk appetite statement. I want to read it out because it's important in terms of looking at the waterfront. We've all agreed to say this is a statement around community health and safety. The council will take all practical and legally required steps to reduce the chance of harm to the public on council-managed sites. The council will work with partners and the public on safety initiatives in public spaces. This may include mitigating environments that create opportunities for harmful social behaviour. That's our statement. That's the starting point that we would expect officers and any solutions to come from when it comes to saying, should we do this much or should we not do this much? And I think in the real world, we're now seeing the discussion around potentially fencing the waterfront falls straight into that element. And there's a crossover there, and hopefully these two things will work together in a positive way for us to get a decision. So I just wanted to make that note because there is real world implications to risk management. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Any other comments folk would like to make? Yes, Liz.
First of all, I'd like to thank the officer. Sorry, I forgot what your name was, but kia ora for your paper. I found it really very interesting, and I like how you put it together with the key things that kaimahi can understand it, and then the roles of management and governance. I think those are the two key things with any risk policy. I think for me, like what I found was really interesting was just how much you covered off, and it was a bit scary as well. But before I get to the scary part, I seeing some of the stuff that is really real, what we have to address right now and what we're seeing in our country right now. I'm really grateful that you've identified those things. So, like in particular, a pension crisis, a labour shortage, and super ageing societies. I mean, like those things are really happening right now. They're affecting so many across multiple levels of what's happening in our community. But the scary things for me that you've highlighted, and I think that's kind of what Bruce was getting at, is do we want some of those things in? Well, I don't really want it in because they are really scary. They are real and could potentially affect our country. You know, the armed conflict, the terrorist attack, the biological, chemicals, or nuclear weapons. So thank you for really looking at everything. But it is a good eye-opener for us to have a look at. So I just really wanted to comment and give my gratitude for your paper.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate that. Geordie.
Yeah, apologies. I've been ducking in and out of the part here, but I guess I was trying to reflect back to some of the other conversations that we have had around risk, and one of the things that I have been seeing throughout the document is kind of setting the tone of it and the culture of it. And I think one of the things that I'm interested in really is around that discussion of, is it always focused on risk, or is it this, I guess, environment of unknowns as well? And kind of whether having an environment where we talk about the unknowns and uncertainties and kind of inquire what are the things that we might not expect, kind of brings a more comforting attitude towards talking about risk. And I think, I guess, particularly from my own reflections and trying to sort of think about the culture of risk, when it does sort of have that word assigned to it, it does kind of feel like, what are all the things that I could potentially do wrong, that I could be called out for, that my team has responsibility for. And I think there is perhaps some benefit in thinking about what are the things that are uncertain that could affect us as a collective or affect our communities that we serve, and sort of some of that tone might be more useful. And so I'll be more clued into it next time and hopefully be able to contribute a bit more. But that was just kind of some of the things that were coming to my mind.
I wonder if I could just draw the debate to conclusion. I think actually I've got some themes from all of you which are really, really helpful here. Liz, I agree. Iona raised the issue of the World Economic Forum, and I think those things are really important and influential, and they have to be part of our debate in that direct sense, either because they're a direct lift and into our position, or indeed we are thinking about how they deal with it. Geordie, I think actually Rachel has used the word uncertainty in her paper, which was something that I think early on Rachel and I discussed. Is actually it's future focused. It's about what's going to stop us from achieving what we have to achieve, which, Tony, comes right back to your point, which is actually our risk management that we focus on here has to be real, and it's about, quite frankly, what is success? What's going to stop us? And it's the uncertainties that do it. So we've got to make certain that we're managing, we do our best to identify, and we've already had with insurance the real risk. You can't see everything, but that's part of the art of risk management. So this is really valuable. I think this is the sort of thing, Rachel's really saying we do need a workshop, a chance to, in a more open way with a bit more time, be able to talk this one through. So I appreciate the comments folk have made. They've all been valuable, particularly for me. I think. Oh, right, okay, sorry, Ona, you're right. I should give you the chance to reply. We're seeing we are doing a formal debate here. Is there anything you'd like to say in response? You said it all? You said it all? Okay, can I move to the motion? Is it okay if we could take the remote, please? You've got 3 there, and I'd ask you to vote. Carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you, Rachel. Stimulated a good discussion. And obviously, a lot more to go. Well, actually, hopefully a lot pragmatic steps to take going forward. Health and safety. We're into that. I'm sure we've got Wendy. Wendy, welcome, Wendy, down the back. I think it's Alice, isn't it? Love to have you here, Alice. It's tremendous to have you on board. Did we meet you before? Look, I have to say, Alice, I'm a wee bit sad if I've actually met you before. Probably
No.
haven't. I haven't? Oh, okay,
No.
good.
This is the first
Well,
time.
welcome to the Risk Committee.
Thank you.
Obviously for the first time, but obviously you're well known to the rest around the room, so it's great to have you on board.
For a different hat. No dogs today.
Dogs. Oh, okay, right. Wendy, Alice, we're in your hands, please. Salient points.
Thank you, Chair. Alice and I will take the report as read, but just a quick intro to the paper. I just want to make mention of our key projects that we have outlined in the report that are progressing really well. Phase 2 of our critical risk review has kicked off, and we've locked in 36 workshops between February and April going forward with key staff across the organisation. So this will do a deep dive into those critical risks and the controls, which is a really good follow-on from phase 1 of that project. So what it's doing is it's picking up on the remaining 17 critical risks. So we reviewed 12 of the critical risks in phase 1. And now we're moving into phase 2 of that project. Following on from the previous project work, our safety management system. So you'll recall that we reviewed and developed a lot of our documents that are in place. We're conscious that we need to ensure now that the education and the continuous improvement of that documentation happens. We don't want to get into a situation of sort of a set and forget approach. So we're currently developing an internal audit as well, which will make sure that we continually improve those documents as we go, and review and update the information as needed. Other than that, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Wendy. Alice, any comments you'd like to make?
No, Wendy's covered that great. All I will add for my reflections for being in this role, there is so much that goes on behind the scenes that this paper doesn't even, cover everything with the random drug and alcohol tests and all the training. So big world.
Thank you for that. Rebecca, I think you got a question.
I do. Kia ora kōrua. My question is about the brain badge certification, and it's not something I'm familiar with, so I'd love to hear just a little bit more about the process that we've gone through to try and become certificated in this area.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's all right. That look of horror on their faces of. This has actually been led through our inclusion strategy, and so we have done a lot of mahi on neurodiversity in the workplace. There's a number of things that we are doing. Brain badge is one of those certifications or accreditations to show that mahi. So I don't have all the detail for you right now. There's been a number of workshops and there's a number of things for us to be able to achieve to be able to get that accreditation. But neurodiversity, we've been putting out kete for in recruitment. We've been taking managers through training on managing neurodiverse employees. That has had incredible uptake and a lot of interest. And we've also opened a neurodiverse employees network, which is staff-led. So it's, really acknowledging the beauty of neurodiversity, what it can bring, and how do we need to be as an organisation to support our neurodiverse employees. Brain badge really just gives us that big, you're doing well kind of.
Right. I'm really pleased to hear about that work, and I just also wonder if we could give a quick update, whether it's via Liam or an email to the Accessibility Advisory Group about the work that's taken place. I think there would be a lot of excitement and positivity about that this has happened.
Yeah, so Mel Fawcett, our Principal Culture, Inclusion and Engagement Advisor, I'm sure would love to come and talk about that, and I have just volunteered her, so.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Iona.
That's lovely, Meredith. Thank you. Sorry, these questions aren't so lovely. I just really shocked still by the Southport murders. Sorry, it might seem like a very long way away, but this is the 3 little girls that were murdered. What are we doing about you know, you would think it would never happen here, but actually, what do we do about, because there was a guy that, a person who had a knife pulled on them in the report, which is terrible. What are we doing to make sure that we don't have extreme acts of violence just when we're in our community facilities or against our staff? And have we done enough, you know, through all this health and safety work?
I'll first maybe elaborate a little bit more on the knife event that you've read, because I understand that would be a cause of concern. This was with a third-party contractor, and it was identified as a hazard outside of the council's control. Just to provide some assurance with this particular event, the contractor did everything that they should do. They isolated themselves, got themselves in their vehicle, called emergency services, and the police were there within 5 minutes. And they've also done a full psychological debrief, not just with that member, but also with the crew. As far as other steps we take, we've got our de-escalation training that we offer to all staff, other resiliency training. We're seeing more and more teams wanting bespoke courses that are unique to them. So we've got a general one that anyone in the council can do, and then we've also got particular teams that are doing it for their specific teams. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a heightened awareness around this sort of stuff. We also work quite closely with the security team. So for some, you know, for the facilities, you know, obviously there's CCTV footage that can help with raising some of those alarm bells pretty early for staff. But staff are definitely in a much better space in terms of reporting. So getting, you know, raising it with their managers or reporting it even through to us as soon as possible, and then putting that training into practice.
Yeah, so I guess it's just actually also if there is an instance, and look, I was one was so ignorant. I said it will never happen, mass murder in this country, and it did. So it's very easy for someone to walk in and do terrible things. So I guess is that in your thinking?
Yeah, definitely, and absolutely, and it does align with the work that the security team are doing also in this space.
Also aligns with wider projects in the council, our relationship with the police and the city safety mahi that's going on in the background. So all these things all fit together. And for certain events that would involve the city safety team, we do keep them in the loop with what's going on so that they're aware when they're working in projects in the community and with businesses.
Okay. And then it's not a positive, but in a way it's quite good that the Auckland Port CEO was held up, you know, held accountable, because, you know, those worker deaths are always, like, my experience at council are always really shocking, and, you know, we just have to reflect about what we could have done better. Do you think that is likely that could happen here? Because I'm just thinking the landfill is a particularly dangerous place. The water is also where we've had deaths. So do you think that we're in a much safer place where we would be doing everything we could so that no one was dying at work because of something we hadn't done?
That's ultimately the aim, right? That nobody, you know, there isn't a fatality in our workplace. I think if we reflect on the last 3 years' work that we've done, we've been setting a really strong foundation for us as an organisation. We've been pretty proactive in that space around that Ports of Auckland outcome. We actually got 2 lawyers to come in and talk about that, and to all our senior leaders and executive leadership team. We've taken on board their, you know, thoughts and take on the matter, and it does give us confidence that what we're doing and where we're heading is in the right direction in terms of all the work that we are doing. One of the key fundamental things that they talked about was the reviewing of critical risks, and we were really pleased to hear that. We're sort of 12 months down that track already. So that work is really important, and it will continue to be important because it doesn't stop there. And we've got to continue to educate and you know, bring the organisation on that maturity journey with us. But we're heading in the right direction. We've definitely seen and felt that shift across the organisation in terms of health and safety.
I also think that case has really set a precedent for everybody that's aware, and it's great that our leaders were so engaged with that.
Through
Meredith,
you,
yes.
Chair, if I can just add, Councillor Pennant, that we actually did also talk at ELT around whether or not the legal briefing for our elected members through this health and safety lens and the determination from Ports of Auckland would be useful for you, because it's not just a matter of public safety and spaces. That's incredibly important. There's a whole lot that made the determination the way it was, including ignoring a number of reports and not taking action. So that's something for governance to also consider.
Thank you. I think it would be a smart idea because, as always, as you're pointing out, it's always case specific. And, well, I won't comment on it publicly because it's perhaps beyond my pay grade. But yes, I think there were some specifics there. Any other questions? Yes, Geordie.
Yeah, my question was kind of around the compulsory induction that we were doing. And I mean, I can see that we were performing at and we were targeting for, but one of the things I'm interested in is how that might compare to other compulsory inductions that we do, and sort of, do we see different attitudes to the different parts of the induction, or is this sort of in line with some other parts of the business and the inductions that they're doing?
So as far as the compulsory inductions, the health and safety and wellbeing module is the highest completed out of all the modules. I think there's around 7 compulsory modules in there, all around that kind of 70%, but there is just that edge there with the health and safety. We could provide the numbers of the overall percentage.
Yeah, we'll send that through because we actually report on completion of induction modules over and above just health and safety. It's something that ELT are really mindful of and pushing actively as well. The other thing we've introduced is for those compliance-based modules, we require now our kaimahi to redo them every 2 years. I think that's really important to keep it top of mind, and so we're going through our first cycle of anyone who has been here for longer than 2 years doing that, and we can give you that data as well. And we are constantly talking about what is it that is getting in the way of people doing those induction modules, and the importance of managers giving their new kaimahi robust induction, but also time to do these modules, not just hit the ground running necessarily. So there's a little bit of a culture change required there too. And making sure people have space in their calendars in the first 2 weeks to really understand what's required of them, what are their responsibilities as a member of the council, not just in their role.
Yeah, that's really good. It was kind of about getting that, I guess, context around it, and perhaps not casting too much of a negative light on it, but recognising the need for improvement. So thanks for your work. That's really awesome.
Thank you, folk. Any other questions for Wendy, Alice or Meredith? No? Would somebody be prepared to move that we receive the report? Thank you, Tony. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Iona. Is there any debate on the motion? I ask you to take your remotes, please, and vote. Thank you, it's carried. And as a reward, could I suggest that we take a short break? Could I make it, look, it's just... It's just gone 10:02. If we could be back on the hour, that would be really good, please. Dean, but we're now starting to talk about a bit of process here. But it is a really great paper, Dean. You've already got us one over, I think, by the clarity with which it's written. So thank you for this. But look, give us your salient points. That'd be great. And I will ask folk to raise questions. I think, Andrew, you may have some comments you want to make too about possible approaches going forward.
Kia ora koutou, thank you, Chair. I guess also thank you for having a break before, because covering accounting policies and stuff I think is fantastic after a break. So I'll try and keep this fairly sort of salient. So a little while ago, at a previous meeting, one of the councillors raised the question around how we account for our carbon credits, and we committed to coming back to the committee with a paper covering that area, as well as just, I guess, that general point around it's good for the committee to challenge our accounting policies occasionally, so we can actually just revisit it and see whether it's still appropriate. So I guess in terms of, background for this. This paper solely relates to the accounting policy for the way we currently manage our carbon credits. As the committee will be aware, there is a separate discussion going on around how we manage our carbon credits and whether that is appropriate, whether we need to change it, whatever. But that's not the topic of this paper. So our carbon credits, we effectively get carbon credits from our kind of qualifying forestry and greenbelt assets. And we can also purchase some, which we then use to surrender for our liabilities that come from our sort of landfill emissions. So we do not trade these carbon credits. We basically hold them for surrender purposes. So what we did is we got PwC to give us some advice on our accounting policy and to look at it, see what other people in the market were doing. They've provided a paper. Effectively, there were two main options for accounting. One was treating it as an intangible asset, which is what we currently do. The other option was as inventory, but we can't use the inventory option because we do not trade carbon credits. So their paper concluded that we were, I guess, accounting for it correctly as an intangible asset. And then further to that, there were two, I guess, sub-options. So you could either account for it at cost, or you could account for it under a sort of a revaluation model. We currently account it for at cost. That appeared to be pretty reflective of what a lot of other entities are doing. And it also, I guess, reflects the fact that we buy our credits and often, a year or two in advance of surrendering them, so we're actually reflecting the true cost when we sell it. We got PwC to have a look at the rationale if we wanted to change to a revaluation model. We could do it, but there are challenges if we went down that road, and it's not a preferred option. There's a number of reasons in the paper that we sort of articulated as to why we wouldn't want to go down that road. And so I guess the overall conclusion was that we decided that our current treatment of carrying it at cost was appropriate for our current model.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Tony, and I've got Tony then Iona, but Andrew, was anything you wanted to say at this point?
Yes. So just to reinforce, because I think we have had some conversations, and in the LTP Finance and Performance Committee paper tomorrow, we are recommending bringing a policy, not the accounting policy and how we account for this, a policy or preparing a policy that really outlines our approach to managing carbon credits and what we have in this space and the why we hold them, the amount we hold, etc. Now, this paper reflects the current status, and when we look at the policy in terms of the why and considering that, we can also reflect, based on the advice within this accounting policy decision, what's next for the way that we account for this. At this point in time, we're just looking at the accounting policy. Any change to the way that we manage our carbon credits could result in a change in accounting policy if we chose to, and we'd bring that advice back to you as part of that process. I know that Councillor Brown in particular feels that we're holding too many carbon credits, and would like to reflect the true cost of that. And I'm just being transparent in terms of the conversations that he has raised with us. And that may well be right, but that's a question of what is the reason and rationale for holding carbon credits as opposed to how we account for them there's a bit of an order here that we need to do. So unfortunately, the LTP committee discussion is tomorrow. So we're doing this in the reverse order in terms of accounting policy, but just recognising that any future conversations will need to build the accounting policy discussion into that.
And clearly, if the committee ultimately through this process was to recommending council adopt a different approach to management, we'd have to revisit the policy.
Correct. Okay. Correct.
Okay. Tony.
Yes, I'm just trying to get my head around. It's a bit complicated. And I appreciate that you've properly separated a clarification on the accounting policy from the decisions around what we do with those credits. When you talk about the cost, what you really mean is the value of the credits that we receive for our forestry and other ecological assets.
Yeah, so cost, I guess we get...
And now the cost sort of implies that we're buying them.
Yeah, so we're
actually getting them given to us.
Yeah, so there's two ways in which we, I guess, acquire carbon credits. Either we are given them from the Crown for our forestry, qualifying forestry assets, in which case it's kind of the cost is the market value at that point in time. Yeah. Or we can go out and buy carbon credits, which we do to then surrender for our landfill emissions, in which case it's obviously the price at which we pay for them.
Okay, so I just wanted to get an understanding. When you mean cost, you also mean it's two things are happening with carbon credits.
It's cost or deemed cost, right. What we'd reflect, yeah.
Okay, and my second question is there anything about this policy recommendation, should it be accepted, that would preempt our decision tomorrow that if we decide to change things then and sell some of the credits we've received, there's no problem with that?
No. In terms of how we are currently accounting, it is pretty clear that it is a valid accounting policy for our current management of carbon credits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Iona.
I said to my colleagues that usually anything accounting makes my eyes glaze over. You can literally see it, but this is fascinating. So thank you very much for the this very interesting paper. So I am struggling because it looks like it's a tangible asset, and so just if you want to be pedantic about it and be accurate. Even though I understand your rationale, and I think it's great that we're going to have a policy. I think that's, yeah. But I'm still struggling a bit with that definition.
It's an intangible asset. That's, I guess, the crux.
But I'm struggling with why we're not calling it a tangible one.
Well,
the market value, we could sell it.
It's carbon credits, they literally fall within the definition of intangible assets. So there are accounting standards out there, and they define certain things. This is one of those things.
It's just the way the accounting standard has defined those for the purposes of accounting.
But could it change? I mean, the accounting standards?
Highly unlikely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're a conservative bunch.
Yeah, clearly, because I'm still struggling a bit just with the logic. And I presume no council really engages in trading with them to make money?
No, we do get PwC to have a look at what's happening, in other councils and stuff. So they did have a look. The vast majority don't. Well, actually, the vast majority hold much smaller volumes, and they don't seem to trade. It's quite hard to necessarily get it or to understand it from the accounting or from the financial statements. But there were very few that actually would, in fact, I can't even remember any, that would treat it as inventory, which would therefore imply that they were holding it as a trading type asset.
Okay. And so if we did accumulate more, could we make money? Which I'm quite, I'm quite keen on doing.
It's like this. I think that if we're looking to make money, You wouldn't necessarily do it through the carbon credit market, right? And so I think we just need to, again, this comes to the policy. This comes to the policy around the why. And I think we really need to have that conversation as a council. Dean has just expressed a view that the amount of carbon credits held by other councils is much smaller. And this could be one of the reasons that Councillor Brown has expressed concerns and quite rightly raised this, and I think this needs to be a collective elected member conversation about what is the strategy here. But from a revenue generating, speculating on that market, I'd probably not advise that, but I'd need my treasurer to help me out with advice in that space.
I would actually.
She's saying no.
I'd actually wonder. We need to be perhaps careful, and this we're probably having tomorrow's discussion. I think if I can put my little tuppence worth on it, we clearly are accumulating a lot of credits which lie there, and there is an potential inherent value in those. To potentially change strategy and realise some, perhaps even all, I don't know why you would, but some of that value may be reasonable. I think we'd want to distinguish that between speculating, which tends to be trading in carbon credits to make a margin on buying and selling. And I would be probably, as your risk chair, very concerned, not just in carbon credits, but in many other areas, if we were to get into the act of speculation. But I think there is, if I've not seen Tim's email, nor your paper tomorrow, but I presume there is a level of value locked in these, which may or may not be realisable. But if you are going to start realising them, you then have the accounting implications, which is really coming back to Dean's paper. If you make decisions either way, one way, tomorrow, we may well have to come back and revisit our paper, would be the key thing, wouldn't it? Is that reasonable? I mean, Sarah, we're having thousands here, but
I think that's exactly right, and that's exactly the advice that we'd provide as a finance team. And I think there's a really important thing that we need to bring together much more information to you in informing that policy decision. We use carbon credits as a natural hedge. I'm not going to go into that today, but if we have a fire or anything like that, it helps protect us. So we just need to bring all of that information to you to help inform what you want our policy position to be in holding carbon credits. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's. Oh, sorry, Ray. Yes, you did have your hand up. Sorry, my mistake. And then Geordie, sorry, I got it in the wrong way, but we'll go with you, Ray, first, then Geordie.
Thanks very much for this, Andrea. I think I understand this as much as I understand the double entry system, which is not very well. When Tim explained to me his logic in actually selling them, he described it as not trading in them, but selling an asset that we actually have. Now, he described that as a tangible asset, and so then. And it seemed to me that his logic, when he was explaining it, seemed to be quite valid. Whereas it seems to me that your reason for not selling them is actually because we've always done it this way.
So just to be very clear, I'm not advocating to not sell or to sell at this point in time. I think that as council officers, we need to bring back advice to you on what we should be doing in that space, and including some of the rationale that Councillor Brown has explained to you, because much of that is very valid, right? I'm not disagreeing with Councillor Brown's views. What we're talking about here is how we currently account for them. So it's quite a separate discussion and decision. And so what we want to do is we just want to confirm the way that we treat them from an accounting purpose, and at this point in time. And we also tomorrow want to get endorsement from the LTP Finance and Performance Committee to do work on a policy for why we hold carbon credits, not for how we account for them, but they are linked. We need to have that conversation about the why, which is the matter that Tim Brown is raising. In fairness to Councillor Brown, he's also asking about greater transparency in his email, and I don't think that that's been traversed in this conversation, because he's actually highlighting that if we recognise these at cost, if we were to currently recognise them at market value, we would reflect a much higher intangible asset in our financial statements. That's true, and however, from an accounting perspective, going out and doing that, getting the revaluations, getting all the evidence that we need to do that, working through, that comes at a cost. And so for now, we think the most efficient and pragmatic way is to continue to treat them the way that they are, avoiding that additional revaluation cost, and working through the policy intent of the why.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add one extra thing to that, which is because there are effectively two options for valuing these carbon credits. If we were to change policy, it is a voluntary change, and the threshold for making that is quite high, and it would be quite challenging to actually meet that threshold, because you have to basically be able to justify that the new treatment is like demonstrably better than your old treatment.
Okay, a hypothetical question. If New Zealand were to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord, would these carbon credits have any value then? Like, could we still sell them, or would they be worthless?
Absolutely no idea, Ray. And
okay.
I don't know. This is really about the accounting policy treatment, and would have to bring back separate advice on that. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
Geordie.
One of the things that I'm interested in, and please interrupt me if this is better for a policy discussion about how we use the credits, but I'm thinking about when we do surrender them, we kind of surrender them for the landfill, for example, at the same time that we charge a user for the credit. And so I'm kind of wondering about the interaction between those two things and sort of how that is reflected within the books if we're charging them more than what we're realising their value is.
It is a bit of a policy side, but and I think it'll probably be covered in the LTP committee.
We can just do it tomorrow. That's all good.
But that is factored in terms of the pricing side.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. If I've picked up the hint of what you're saying, but I won't go into it. I've got some thoughts on that myself. Okay, is there anything else then that folk would like to raise with Dean or Andrea, indeed? Right. So look, quite frankly, we got to the point now we need to look at the resolutions, and I think this may have actually exercised Tim a wee bit. I'm personally pretty relaxed about these resolutions. It's saying, apart from receiving Dean's report, which, wow, we've generated lots of good discussion about accounting policy, is that in effect, and it might even go back to Andrea's last point about transparency, that we keep the current status quo. Yes, Iona? Okay, we keep the status quo of reporting them at cost. Thank you. That's what I'm getting to. So the first point is, let's keep the same accounting policy, is what the proposition is. The third resolution is recognising, if at a subsequent meeting, and clearly I didn't realise it's going to be tomorrow, you start to want to change things, the policy is going to have to be revisited. And that's what I take from the third one there. So it's not saying the way we manage carbon credits should stay. What we're really saying here is that our accounting policy should follow how we manage carbon credits. It's always the aim of accounting, is to reflect reality. Now, don't laugh, Hannah. And that's effectively what this is saying is, the reality we face at the moment is we are non-trading. And the best solution for us is to continue the policy of recording them at cost, less impairment. And if we change our management, let's also take into account and reflect how does that affect our accounting policy. Okay? So that's the proposition in front of us. Do I have somebody prepared to move that? Ray, are you moving that? Yeah. No, I'm looking for a mover first before we have a debate. Do I have a person prepared to move that? Tony, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Rebecca. Right, now we'll have some more questions, but I'm going to go to Ona first. She had a hand up.
Actually, just wondering if I'm not going to die in a ditch on it, but whether the committee would agree to a slight amendment to note that we are looking at the issue of a policy.
Oh, as a fourth.
Yeah.
Would that be useful?
I don't think it will be voted down, to be honest.
I think we're all agreeing that we're.
I think a policy.
I think we're all agreed, but
very
we don't want to feel like we hedged ourselves in.
Oh, that is.
Well, why don't we just work it now? Yeah. I mean, I don't.
Are committee members okay?
Isn't that what 3 is saying, Iona?
No, but we are. Yeah. I know we're not supposed to, but I do want the conversation to be reflected that we know there are some bigger issues than at play here.
Well, we know because you told us.
No, Tim told us.
And you told me.
So sorry, I think we're all trying to get to the same ground rather than necessarily have opposing views for which there's a need for an amendment and a mover and what have you. I'm sort of would like to avoid that if I could. Is there a collective desire for some form of more clarity that we aren't in any way trying to bar consideration of a different way of managing assets?
We're looking at thinking about how we manage them rather than.
So I do reiterate, I think the most straightforward and fastest way to get towards this is to seek a short adjournment, have Councillor Pannett talk to an officer to see whether or not they could get officer supported, an agreed statement that could be added as an amended substantive, and by the leave of the meeting, then we can just add it in, and then we can all vote on that, discuss it.
No, hold on, wait a sec, Liz. I just want to hear Tony out first.
I just think until we've got something written, it's difficult to debate.
I'm personally comfortable. Liz, you got a view, kind of view?
I really don't.
I don't think we're looking here for a long. If it's more than, it can't take more than 5 minutes. Can I just suggest that we take? Can we just take a short?
5 minutes.
Can we just take a short break for 5? Get up what we can agree. I'm open to whether Andrea or Iona, you just take us through this, please, or will I just read it out? Thank you for your advice, Andrea. Perhaps you just
No
lead us through
problem at all. So what we've just done is suggesting a slight rewording of 3 to note that that we agree that future work is expected to be completed on a policy for holding carbon credits, and if this results in a change in the business model for managing those credits, the future accounting policy will be revisited.
Yep, that'll be brilliant. Thank you. So that will become the new 3.
Yep.
And I think if I perhaps I need to check. If I think everybody was agreement we needed to be perhaps a bit more explicit like that. I think we've reached that. Tony, I think you moved the motion. Are you happy with that, buddy?
Yes, I'm happy for the amendment.
Okay, rightio. So If there's any discussion on the motion now, there isn't, can I ask you to take your remote, please, and vote? That's great. Thank you for your help on that. Oh, Rebecca? Sorry. I know how to use my remote. Look at what is it? You know, pride comes before a fall. I suspect is the real answer to that. I wonder if we could move to the decision-making register, and I think your name might be against that, Andrea.
I'll take it as read.
Take it as read. Okay. Is there any? Well, I'll move from the chair. We receive this. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Tony. Is there any debate on that? There isn't. Can you take your remotes, please, and we'll vote. Brilliant. Now, it's time for us to move. Sorry, it's carried? Carried, thank you. It's time to move into public excluded. We have two matters in front of us, as they're set out on page 67 of our agenda. And I consider that they are good reasons to be in public excluded. So I will move from the chair. Thank you, Iona. Oh, okay. You'll sing me. Thank you, Liz. Right, debate. Iona.
Look, I take the point about the litigation matters, but it's the Office of the Auditor General. Why does that need to be PX? It didn't look particularly sensitive. I think it should be.
It's actually probably a good point, but we've all. Sorry, Andrea, were you going to say something?
Well, just to offer some advice. So one of the key aspects of having the OAG and Audit New Zealand, probably Laura's report from the Office of the Auditor General talks about numerous areas of focus of the office and you know, we've always grouped them together with the auditor. The importance of having the auditor come and speak is to ensure that there is a free and frank conversation in terms of the practices that they're working through, much of which will be confidential at this point. It doesn't become public, and of course, until they issue a audit opinion. So things like status of audit, financial performance, those kind of things, and the audit of that is confidential until we get the audit opinion and their views on that. But it enables the auditor to speak more freely and frankly with you around things like any concerns that they may have, particularly in internal controls, although just reflecting, we've got a brand new auditor, so don't expect her to have fully formed comments on that. I look at her as I'm speaking and looked at the horror on her face. But I think there's a really important principle to enable that free and frank discussion.
Point taken, but I do think that report was not sensitive, and can we decouple?
So the one thing that we could usefully do if in the future, if this was what the committee wanted, if we got approval from the Office of the Auditor General, the conversation could be in PX and we could table that paper and make sure it's public afterwards if they were comfortable with that.
And in fairness to Andrea as well, I mean, I promoted the treating it in PX, and it's often because, and I agree with your point that you made, Andrea, and yours, Iona, that actually there isn't necessarily anything directly sensitive in this report, but I have encouraged the auditors to provide us with a memo for every meeting, which normally does also include other matters that we would also have in PX as well, and consistent with what you're actually saying. Tony?
Just one officer advice to say that if in public excluded, when we're considering the discussion with the auditor, which I agree should be in confidence, is it possible to amend the motion to accept the report to also ask for it to be publicly released should the auditor agree after the PX meeting?
I'm just looking at DM services to make sure that would be consistent. I don't have a problem with it, but...
Yeah, we can proactively release information if that's okay, but we can also have in the public excluded the vote to go into public excluded if you want a second clause in there about the information that can be publicly released.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit confusing that if we're in public excluded, can we make a decision to release information? We're not there yet. I just want this discussion actually be in public. So I just want to understand that if we're in public excluded, to give confidence to the public that should we have a discussion, to release information that's presented public excluded, that it can be released afterwards, and that's something we can move and have
We
fast.
just need to do that in conjunction with our auditors and the Office of the Auditor General to make sure that they're comfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
And as Bruce noted, there's nothing particularly sensitive in this one from our perspective. It may be from theirs, but in the future there may be some sensitive information. So we just need to play that. But we do that all the time with our other papers, so I can't see anything.
So I just want to I support Councillor Pannett in terms that we should be as open and transparent as possible, and this is one way of doing that. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'd agree. It depends on your standing auditors, but I'm used to actually resolving each of the items, whether they would be released or not. So subject to, obviously, the decision of the Chief Executive. Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Can I ask you to take your remote, please, and vote? Pardon? No, I think we'll do it. I think if I've got it right, we'll look at it when we get to the actual paper. Okay, thank you. It's carried. Rightio, we will be moved into public excluded in some way. I want people to let me know that we are. We're all grateful for the way in which Andrea, all the staff were prepared to engage in debate and discussion with us. Thank you very much for that. I wish you guys well for the afternoon, and indeed what seems like probably even a bigger meeting tomorrow. Can you join me, please, in the closing karakia? Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te urutapanui. Te nana ki a Aotearoa. Te ake. Whakaria. Kia wā te. Ai rā. Thank you very much.